Hello, welcome to the first ever live community virtual web forum about teen drug driving. My name is April Cabrera. I'm the Community Affairs Program Manager for the Bristol County District Attorney's Office.
And I'm Rick Burt, the Development Officer for SAD National. We're so excited that you've taken the opportunity to join us today for this historic and groundbreaking discussion on an important issue that's affecting our communities all across the country. We hope that you'll take this information, take it to heart, share it, and host local events in your SAD chapters and communities across the country.
Before I introduce our moderator, we just want to say thank you to the Bristol County District Attorney's Office, especially our Bristol County District Attorney, Tom Quinn, and SAD National for sponsoring this event. And we definitely got a lot of support from the National Institute on Drug Abuse. So we just want to take our time to say thank you for tuning in today. We hope you get a lot of good information from this web forum. And I'm going to introduce our moderator, Ashley Bendixson, who is our lovely moderator this afternoon. She's going to be generating a lot of questions, tweeting, all that good stuff. So definitely get engaged. Thank you guys for tuning in. Ashley?
Thank you, April. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ashley Bendixson. I work for the Bristol County District Attorney's Office, and I'm happy to serve as your moderator today. We are here, as they mentioned, to talk about a very important issue, and that is teen drugged driving. We talk about drunk driving, we know what that is, but drugged driving has been an under-addressed issue up until this week, and we're hoping to really, as my partner said, break ground and talk about this issue and bring this issue to light. So without further ado, I'd like you to meet my amazing panelists this afternoon, expert panelists and experienced panelists in the field. So please introduce yourselves.
Hi, my name is Laurie Gonzalez, and I am here as a parent advocate. My son Corey, in July of 2013, suffered a heroin overdose. My son survived. He now lives with an anoxic brain injury. He has problems with speech and fine motor skills and walking. Every day is a battle for us, but luckily he still is here, and I am just here to advocate for the parents and families.
Good afternoon. I'm Paul Machado. I'm the second district attorney, assistant district attorney with the Bristol County District Attorney's Office. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Frank Pacheco. I'm a police officer at the town of Raynham. I'm a patrolman. I've been on the force here for approximately 4 years now. From Raynham, I grew up here. I coach football, youth football with all the kids, so I'm around all these issues daily, whether it be the youth, high school, but I'm definitely around and I see it on the streets, and it's definitely an issue.
Hi, I'm Brian Delaney. I'm an East Hampton High School senior, and I'm from SAD, representing a SAD student here today. I'm also a member of the Massachusetts SAD Advisory Board, and my school this year has taken an interest in distracted driving and drug driving, and we've had numerous events to raise awareness around that, so I hope to share my knowledge with all the viewers today.
Hi, my name is Jess Roscoe. I originally hail from New Rockford, North Dakota, a small town of about 1,200 people, and I graduated from college in Concordia College in Moorhead, Minnesota. Currently, I am working at SAD National. I am a program associate, and a lot of the programming that I do, centers around legislative affairs.
So again, if you're just tuning in, we're here today to talk about the growing issue of teen drugged driving. Not only is this going to educate you on teen drugged driving, but we're also going to accept any questions that you may have. This is a live interactive forum, and being that the District Attorney's Office is co-hosting this, you can ask your questions directly through many of our social media sites. Feel free to log on to Twitter. You can find us at BristolDA, and you can submit any of your questions through there. In addition, if you're watching us live on Ustream, you'll see a chat box to your right, and you can also ask questions there as well. In addition, throughout the conversation today, I'll be asking you questions to kind of get your feedback and see what your knowledge base is about teen drug driving. So that being said, let's get right into it. Anybody could answer. Feel free to just join in. What is drug driving? What exactly is it? What makes it different from drunk driving? And is this an issue among today's teens?
Ashley, I do think that with the decriminalization of marijuana a few years ago in Massachusetts, that I think that there is more of an attitude that the consumption of marijuana is neither criminal nor dangerous. And I think that we certainly see an attitude that is more liberal in terms of this is okay. With that, we also see more people who are behind the wheel under the influence of drugs, very often I think thinking, well, I can handle it, which is not true. Right?
Yeah, I can piggyback that. As far as the type of drugs being used or what constitutes drug driving, like you said, it could be anything from marijuana to prescription meds from your parents, a medicine cabinet, and it could be, illicit drugs that have always been banned, cocaine, heroin. We see it all on the streets, and anything that can affect your cognitive ability to drive and perceive things coming at you, and your reaction time is, essentially what we look for drug driving, or when we're trying to see what it is on the streets if your driving's affected.
I think that's a really good point that he just made, that it's not always illicit drugs that it is prescription drugs as well. Any of you in your line of work or your experience have anything to add about teens using prescription drugs nowadays, and perhaps whether that's growing even more than it has been in past years?
I have a question on that. Do we think that the use of drugs has increased over alcohol for these kids, because I feel like it's easier or it's not easily traced? For instance, if they don't smell like alcohol when they get home, that their parents may not notice that they're on something. I don't know if that's something that's seen more by the police.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember when I was in high school, not terribly long ago, it was almost unheard of for kids to take pills at all at like any type of gathering. Some kids would drink, and then it started kind of changing over to it was okay for kids to take some pills from their parents and stuff, that they thought it was okay or better than alcohol for some reason. And then it's kind of grown toward the marijuana, the pills, and you don't see almost any alcohol parties anymore. With these kids nowadays, and it's all different types of drugs and medications and pills.
I'm sorry. We have a case that's pending from a nearby community where two 13-year-olds one 13-year-old brought in prescription medication that he took from home, gave it to a classmate, 8th grade classmate, who then gave it to other classmates, and they were initially charged with very serious distribution cases. It came to light because the girl appeared to be under the influence and was taken to the hospital. So it's not uncommon to see. I'm sorry, Jess?
Oh, no problem. I guess from a young person's perspective, when I was in high school, I saw definitely a lot more alcohol than drugs, but as I transitioned to college, I definitely noted a shift. A lot of people use things like Adderall or other medications just like it as almost a study aid. You see other prescription drug abuse, but kind of rooting back to that original question, I think that prescription drug abuse has gotten very alarming, and I think the fact that there is the assumption that because it's a prescription it's safe, a lot of people don't comprehend or even seem to sense any of the consequences that they could have using substances like that.
And interestingly, I'm sure that parents as well aren't monitoring the prescription drugs in their home as much as they might be looking out for signs of marijuana in their child's bedroom as well. So I think to all the parents who might be watching right now, this is a really good opportunity to think about, where are the prescription drugs in your home? Are you counting these bottles? Are you making sure that they're out of your child's reach and making sure that they're not using them? I'm sure there's a wealth of information online, and I'm sure that you can look on the National Institute of Drug Abuse, who is sponsoring this event today, and I'm sure there's a wealth of information on there for you as well to keep your children safe and away from these drugs. If there's any teens out there listening, we would be curious to get your response to some of these questions. We have some great first responders who obviously are seeing that teens are using both illicit and prescription drugs, but perhaps you see this in your school. Perhaps you've heard it amongst your peers. So we ask you, have you heard about your friends or peers using drugs or thinking about using drugs? And if so, use our social media accounts and let us know what you think about this issue. So going back to the idea of drugged driving, is there a difference between drugged driving and drunk driving?
Absolutely. Do you want to go over the law part of it?
Well, I would certainly say there's a difference. One of the most common cases that we prosecute in our district courts is operating under the influence of alcohol. Our assistant DAs become very familiar with trying cases that deal with the consumption of alcohol. The courts are very aware of the officer's testimony concerning the general field sobriety test for alcohol impairment. Even jurors may be aware of what the signs of intoxication are. We have a very difficult time with proving operating under the influence of drugs, particularly in Massachusetts. Some of our laws are not as powerful as some in other states. As a result of which, we can have a very, very difficult time in proving operating under the influence of drugs. There aren't the same type of standardized field sobriety tests that are available. In Massachusetts, we don't have a per se statute. Some jurisdictions have a per se statute, which makes it illegal to drive having consumed any controlled substance. That's not the case in Massachusetts, so we actually have to show both the consumption of the alcohol and of the drug and impairment as a result of that. And they really do not have, there is no breathalyzer test for marijuana. There is no specific, as far as I know, field sobriety test for consumption of cocaine or some of the other drugs. So it makes it much more difficult to prosecute.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Like the biggest thing we look for out there is impairment. We try to do all the standard field sobriety tests that we have, that we've been trained in the academy, but the drug consumption is moving so much faster than the training and the laws that it's tough to stay on top of and get convictions for this drug driving that's such an epidemic. You try to look for cognitive failures or balance failures and try and determine how impaired their actions are, and then you have to pair that with, well, did you even find any drugs or anything in the vehicle? Because without stuff like that, it makes it very tough to convict. But I mean, the signs are pretty obvious when you're with someone that has taken drugs and is impaired, but the convictions are very difficult.
Is there an obvious difference between these signs of impairment versus someone who's drunk or on drugs, in your opinion?
Yes. Oh, absolutely. We're trained to death in OUIs and alcohol with odor of alcohol, glassy eyes, everything you see in alcohol consumption. And drugs, it can be anything. Some drugs make your eyes pinpoint. Some drugs make your eyes wide. Some people can kind of snap out of it a little bit and pay attention for a little while, and it makes it very difficult for us to keep on top of it and actually see what's wrong with them. I mean, it could be anything from maybe they're having a medical condition, or maybe they're on drugs, or maybe they've been drinking, or maybe it's a combination of all three or two of those. So it's very difficult.
As far as when you're patrolling, what are some of the things that you would notice as far as the automobile goes?
A lot of, there'll be, people with cell phones are everywhere nowadays, and a lot of our calls generate from people with cell phones and on passerbys, and a lot of the times it's an erratic operator, and the erratic operator will come in, they touch the yellow line, or they're all over the road, and or they almost hit another car. Sometimes it'll be as bad as they pass out behind the wheel, they're at a traffic light and they just slumped over the wheel. I've had numerous crashes. I've had the same people crash multiple times that have overdosed and while driving and crashed while their car's been moving. It doesn't always end up in an overdose. It could just be the impairment of crossing the lines, wrong way driving. There's numerous things that indicate impairment, but they they range from the littlest things, to hitting the line, to passing out and overdosing.
Thank you. For those of you who are watching, you'll see a phone number on our screen as well. So if you have any questions during the course of this forum today, please feel free to use our social media accounts at Bristol DA. You can also ask questions right online in the forum, or you can call the number on your screen. It's also 508-692-9540. One more follow-up question for you. Do you frequently see young people? Are you frequently pulling over young people that are impaired?
It's becoming more frequent, absolutely. It's getting worse and worse. I've been here for 4 years. I was a police officer for 3 or 4 years in the Vineyard before that, where it was a problem as well. And it's getting worse and worse with, anywhere, as soon as you can drive, you're 16 and a half, 17. And so they're definitely exposed to it at a young age and a younger age, and it's definitely becoming more and more prevalent.
Okay. So we are focusing on one facet of drug use, and that is teens who use drugs and get behind the wheel, which naturally is very dangerous for them as well as any other motorists on the road. But perhaps some of the panelists today might be able to fill us in on some of the other consequences, not just the dangers of getting into an automobile accident, perhaps fatal, but what are some of the other perhaps physical, short-term and long-term consequences of using drugs and drug driving?
I can answer from the insurance part of that, because I'm an insurance agent, that a lot of these kids don't realize that if they're driving and they have an accident, and it's an at-fault accident, they're going to be subject to a surcharge. And automobile surcharges for young kids is very expensive. Automobile insurance for kids in general is very expensive. So that's something that's going to carry with them for 3 to 5 years, which they would have to worry about. The other thing that I always told my son was, if you're behind the wheel of the car, you're not only putting yourself in danger, but you're putting others in danger. I always would say to him, can you imagine how you would feel if you hit a minivan with a family in it? You hit a mother and her 2 kids, and you severely injure or you kill them. You're going to have to live with that guilt for the rest of your life. So there's a lot of long-term effects that you may have to live with if you're driving the car, while under the influence of drugs or alcohol.
Perhaps from some of our SAD representatives, you advocate for making healthy decisions and not destructive decisions. So how might you approach this issue in speaking to teens and telling them the destructive consequences of using drugs and making the decision to drive while under the influence?
Coming from the SAD standpoint, I think it's important that you be a positive role model to your fellow peers and your fellow classmates. And that would mean, I know I had a friend of mine who had abused drugs, and he was involved in some activities like that. And at one point, I basically just told him, if you ever consider quitting, or you wanted to stop, or you need somebody to help you along the way, that I would be there to help you. I will help you, guide your way through, and I'm there to support you, because I want to see, I want you around for a long time, and this can have effects on you that can be long-lasting or fatal. So I think it's important, as like a teenager friend and an advocate for making healthy decisions, that you support your peers, support your friends, support someone you know. Even if you don't know that person personally, it's important that you show them that you care as well. So I think it's important to be a positive role model, show that you don't have to be cool, popular, fun, or even just relax. When you're using, if you're using drugs, that you don't need that. You don't need to use that. So I think it's important to be a positive example.
Did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I guess the only thing I would really add to Brian's comments are that I think that coming from college and high school alike, there's a big misconception that everybody's doing it. When the statistics show otherwise. There are members of SAD chapters all across the nation, people who aren't in SAD chapters and are in similar community groups that don't need alcohol and drugs to, like you said, have fun and to be cool and that sort of mentality. And so I think it's just important for SAD and community groups alike to just, to be present, to be vocal, and just kind of be that strong presence of young people who don't need those substances in order to have fun.
Thank you.
I think we have a caller on the line.
Oh, we do. Excellent. Our first caller. All right, so I'm going to tune in. Okay, we have Trevor on the line. Trevor is from Florida. Trevor, hi. Hello? Technical difficulties. Live forum, folks. Hello, Trevor? Okay. Well, maybe he'll call back. All right, moving on. So what were we talking about? Oh, we're talking about teen drug driving here today. Very serious, very important issue, and it's so wonderful that we have this opportunity to gather experts in the field and really bring this issue to light. So again, we're talking about teen drugged driving. We were talking about teens making the decision to use drugs. I guess my question to you, and perhaps it's obvious, but why are teens making the decision to use drugs? We were talking about earlier, alcohol and parties tend to go hand in hand, whereas drugs perhaps don't. Teens are using them at all hours of the day, using them knowing that they're prescribed for one thing and not for recreational use. So why are so many teens deciding to use drugs for recreational purposes?
In my opinion, a lot of teens at least are using drugs because their friends and their co-workers are using them as well. They're influenced, by people that they know. I know even in my community there's students whose parents smoke drugs and do drugs with them, which is alarming. So it's a lot of the time it's really the experience of the individual. If their friends or their peers do the drugs, they can often that can also be an effect on them. So I think that's one of the reasons why, at least.
And one thing that I've noticed as well is that in the media, TV shows, movies, Weeds on Netflix, The Wolf on Wall Street, all of these different shows are right now portraying drugs in a very safe manner. And this really hasn't been done in the past. Before, I think drugs were around, but they were never openly spoke about in those mediums. And so now that I think young people are seeing this and watching these conversations happening without consequences, I think that it's kind of giving the facade that using drugs is okay. And that's definitely not the message that we should be sending our young people.
Good point. So it's almost like we're glamorizing the use of drugs and substances in the media. I'm sure that is one of many reasons that teens are deciding to use drugs. But if you're a teen and you're watching, we would love to hear your input on this. We have been getting some input from Twitter. One young teen says, high school students are very familiar with the dangers of drunk driving, but I don't think there is much awareness of drugged driving. And that's exactly why we are here today, to bring to light the issue of drug driving. Another person commented.
Could I?
Sure.
Because I have some numbers for a study by the National Highway Traffic Safety Association.
Please, share.
And I believe the year for this was 2012. And what they did was they looked at the study of seriously injured drivers. What they found was that 26.9, almost 27% of those who were seriously injured drivers tested positive for marijuana. 11.6% tested positive for cocaine. 5.6 tested positive for either methamphetamine or amphetamine. So I think those numbers show that when there is a crash where a driver is seriously injured, there is a very significant proportion of those drivers who are also under the influence of some type of drug, perhaps multiple drugs.
Wow. I find the 27% marijuana very startling, exactly as we were just saying, marijuana being legalized and giving this perception that perhaps it's okay, well, perhaps you can operate.
It's decriminalized in Massachusetts, but I think the experience in Colorado, since marijuana was recently legalized there, is showing that you can Google it and you see that they are very concerned about the increase in the number of safety issues on the roads of Colorado due to the legalization of marijuana.
Absolutely.
I think Trevor's calling back.
Is Trevor calling back?
That's what the
We're
producer
going to
is
try to
saying.
get Trevor again. Hello, Trevor?
Yeah, hi.
Oh, hello. Hi, Trevor. Thanks for calling in. What's your question today?
No problem. It was actually regarding my friend. My friend does drugs. I don't really want to get too much into it, but I was just wondering if there was any programs that you could recommend for him or in general, because he's told me multiple times like he'd like to wean off of it. But just wondering if you could recommend any kinds of programs that I could tell him about.
Sure. Okay, thank you for the question, Trevor. Thank you. So Trevor called in basic information, said that he has a friend that has been using drugs. He didn't want to give too much information as to what kinds of drugs they were, but he was asking the panel what resources he might be able to point his friend in, because he says he's trying to get away from it, but he just doesn't feel he has the support. So what kind of resources are there for teens who perhaps are using drugs and are trying to stop?
I know, as far as the police department goes, we can do anything from, we start with the parents, obviously. We tell the parents if we catch the kids doing anything, that's illicit or dangerous. We tell the parents that peers can help. There's treatment programs. There are involuntary hospitalization. They call it Section 35s in Massachusetts, where if they're that hard up where they can't get rid of the habit themselves, they can actually be involuntarily hospitalized if it gets to that point where it's such a, and we actually now are training that if we go to a call that's drug use and overdose or anything like that, we apply to the court on their behalf, on the family's behalf, on the victim, on the person using the drugs' behalf, and we actually try and get them help ourselves. But that's the most extreme example. Like I said, it starts with family and friends, and and having support. And a huge part of it is even before addiction is the people not wanting to do it themselves, or trying to find it in themselves for a reason not to do it.
How about as a student? Are there school resources?
I think it's important to harness the resources, like you said, at your school. Talk to your teachers. If there's a coach, a teacher, a coach, your principal, anybody like that are great resources. But even to be the friend, and you don't want to turn anybody away right away, but support them and make sure that they know that you care and that you'll help them and walk them through. And provide them these resources. And even if it means somebody might be afraid to talk to their principal or afraid to talk to a coach or a family member, go along with them and support them.
For those who aren't familiar with SAD, could you just give a brief background as to what SAD is and how it's involved in the school system?
Sure. So SAD is Students Against Destructive Decisions. It's an active club in schools across the country, and it works to addressing destructive decisions such as substance abuse, distracted driving, drug driving, bullying, and different prevention topics like that. And it's a club that will assist in raising awareness around different things like that.
Mm-hmm. And if a student felt that they needed help, could they reach out to their SAD chapter for a reference or referral?
Yeah, absolutely, and so I'll definitely speak to this. Coming from the SAD National Office, we've kind of spoken about our partnership with NIDA and with NHTSA and with ONDCP already. But the beauty of SAD is that we have so many partners across the nation, so many other organizations that are creating the same caliber of material, producing the same caliber of research that we are. And so actually, if you go to our website, www.sad.org, we have a list of all of our partners. Many of them address the issue of drug driving. And so please go on the website, look for resources. I'm sure there's plenty on there. You'll find something that you need. And so if you are facing these issues, whether it be yourself, a family member, or a friend, we definitely can point you in the right direction if you just go look online. So,
do you think that youth are more apt to tell someone their own age? Are they reticent to speak to their parents or adults or counselors at school?
I think it is important that a friend or a student their own age talks to them. I think they are probably more apt to speak up to someone that they're close to, that they've spent time with. Sometimes it is difficult to talk to a parent or talk to a teacher about something like this. So I do think it's important that they can address it to a friend or a close buddy.
But piggybacking off of that too, I think that there is a lot to be said about the relationship between friends, but this really shouldn't deter parents from initiating those tough conversations. You know, the worst thing that we can do with an issue that's rising like this is be silent about it, and that's what we're doing today, having this webinar, and that's what we should try to continue to do. And so as these issues arise, parents, please, please, please initiate these difficult conversations with your children, with other members of the community, because once we are silent about it, that's when it's going to keep happening.
Okay. And so, Trevor, in regards to your question, we hope that this gives you some feedback and some guidance, but in addition to just handing his friend a phone number or a name of someone he can talk to, what can a friend do, just friend to friend, for someone that they know that's using drugs?
I think he can, I mean, like I mentioned before, just support them, and also, you know, guide them to these different resources and guide them to SAD. And also, I think it's important too that, that the friend comes along with you as well and leads you to these sources. So I think that's important. But provide support and make sure that they know that you care about them.
Thank you. All right. Good luck, Trevor, to you and your friend. I'd like to maybe now speak with you. As a parent, were there signs that you saw or perhaps any indication that led you to believe that your teen was using drugs?
Initially, no, probably because he was away at college. My son did not have any drug use at all while he was in high school. His drug use actually came from a sports injury. He had shoulder surgery, had prescription meds, and he became addicted to those prescription meds. He was away at college, and he started to buy the Percocets on campus. My husband and I really were not aware that there was any problem until we noticed when he would come home, his personality was a little bit different. He would be really moody, probably because he needed some pills. He was withdrawing a little bit. And we noticed his grades start to slip. But it's little things like that that I think you can pick out where there's just a little bit of a change in their personality. They're just not the same. You know, his friends began to change. The people that were his friends were no longer his friends. But initially it did take us a while to realize it, only because he wasn't living at home.
Do you have any advice perhaps for parents who are out there that are concerned about their teens, things that they should be looking for in addition to these small changes, but you know, how might they take safeguards to take precautions to safeguard their home, at least for high school students, let's say, when they are living at home?
Yeah. I think probably one of the number one things is just education, to talk to them about drugs, to talk to them about the dangers of drugs. I never went looking through his room because I never really had any suspicions that he was using drugs. But looking back now, maybe I should have just paid a little bit more attention to those things. And you know, I know it's their space, and I should respect their privacy. But on the other hand, they are living in your house, so I think that you do have the right to just go looking through their things and just pay attention to who they're hanging around with, if their friends change. But sometimes it's a difficult thing to realize, and I think as a parent, if you don't really ever suspect it, you don't really go looking for it, and I think that was part of the problem in my house. But I think parents have to realize it can happen to you. My son was a National Honor Society varsity athlete who never even had a detention in his life, and then he turned to opiates and then eventually heroin. So it can happen to anyone, and I think people just need to remember that.
Thank you.
She makes a great point where the fact that the reasons for taking the drugs are, you know, numerous, endless. It could be a sports injury. I hear that all the time. Or, you know, I fell off a ladder, hurt my back, I got addicted. My doctor gave me as many pills as I wanted to and then just cut me off. And then I had to get them elsewhere. And I had to turn to heroin when that got too expensive. It could be, you know, signs of depression. It could be social. It could, you know, the reasons for taking the drugs are probably one of the most important thing to find when you're trying to get them to stop. Like I said, whether it's depression, social, an injury, and then you can, like you said, go to your friends, go to wherever, support groups, when you find out the reason they're taking those medications and pills and drugs.
Thank you. All very good points, and I think it just goes back to education. Our teens aren't using these drugs for malicious purposes or because they know that they're destructive. It's simply a misunderstanding, not knowing the consequences. Perhaps it's just one friend that pressures them into making one bad decision. We're actually going to turn over to Twitter right now. We have some questions coming in. You can ask us your questions as well using the username @BristolDA. This question comes from Katie Quigley. She says, Bristol DA, my question is from a legal standpoint. What are the consequences for drug driving? So what are the legal consequences for drug driving?
Well, Ashley, on the books, the legal consequences are the same as they are for operating under the influence, and so it progresses. For a first offense, the disposition is usually a probationary period with a loss of license. Second, third, fourth offenses obviously entail some incarceration time. Those would apply the same for driving under the influence of drugs. However, unfortunately, I have to say that it's very difficult for us to actually be able to prove operating under the influence of drugs the way that the laws are in Massachusetts. That's different in other states. Hopefully we'll see some changes. I know that there is a bill pending right now to make drivers submit to blood tests in the event of a serious bodily injury, a crash involving a serious bodily injury. However, there are other cases, as much as it may be difficult for us to now actually prove the separate charge of driving under the influence, there are unfortunately a lot of consequences that, people are seriously injured. Sometimes people die as a result of that. So there could be other charges, such as motor vehicle homicide, where we don't have to prove the consumption of drugs necessarily. We can just prove bad driving. And the consequences for that can be, as you know, very, very serious. So the consequences can be, loss of license, probation, incarceration in some cases. So they can be legally very serious. And there's a tremendous cost. There's a tremendous cost in just hiring counsel, the loss of license, what you have to do to, loss of jobs if people can't get to their jobs, and as Laurie said, the insurance premiums. So there's serious consequences.
And to follow up on that, for teens who are convicted of crimes, who develop a criminal record at a young age, what are even some of the longer-term future consequences of having a criminal record?
Well, we do know that criminal records can preclude someone from being eligible for financial aid. So for certain offenses, financial aid is not available if they want to go to college. Obviously, records follow people throughout their lives. Employers get a different version of a criminal record than we see in the court, but nevertheless, employers would potentially see convictions of that kind. And I would certainly think that it is something that an employer might take into consideration. If someone is, we have obviously a drug-free policy in our job. I think we would certainly look twice at an employer, especially if they had equal qualifications, one that had a history of a drug offense on their record as opposed to one who doesn't. So there's a lot of serious consequences.
Absolutely. Another reason to educate your children, and if you're a teen, to stay away from using drugs and especially getting behind the wheel after using drugs. Another very simple question came in from Twitter from Margot. She says, what happens if I get arrested or if a teen gets arrested? So that's, I think, a really nice picture to paint for teens who are making the decision to get in their vehicle, get behind the wheel. If they are to get arrested, what is their night like? What is that immediate experience like for them?
That's a great question. Obviously, depending on what they were doing to get arrested, a lot of the times it's something shoplifting related or theft related, or the driving. Certainly one of the biggest ones now. Vehicle gets impounded, then they got tow fees, then we got to call their parents, we got to call the juvenile detention area, we got to call the clerk to see how much bail is going to be, if they're going to be eligible for bail. This is a several hour process of booking, questions, reports, and then depending on what happens, if what they did, what the bail is, they either get sent to the juvenile detention. They could go home for the night. They could wait until, if it's early in the morning, they have to wait until court. Obviously, there are different rules for juveniles than there are for adults as far as detention in the police station and what happens there. But it's not a very pleasant experience at all. And obviously, when you have to call home to mom and dad and say, I'm at the Raynham police station, it never goes good from there.
Now, do the police stations notify the schools? Do teachers find out? Does the principal find out?
We have an awesome school resource officer that he's been school resource officer since I went to the middle school here. And he's very active and, goes to the police station, reads all the juvenile reports, and then goes to the school. And he's very active with letting the teachers know or letting the guidance counselors or the principal know about what's happening or, what could happen, and vice versa. If he sees things at schools, he intervenes before these children get arrested and, before they have to have something on their permanent record that could preclude them from jobs and college and stuff. So it's a double-edged sword where he kind of attacks it from both ways, where if he didn't get to him, he will in the schools, or if he sees it in the schools, he can try and help before it gets that bad.
Excellent. So again, if you're just tuning in, we're talking about the issue of teen drug driving. We hope to educate you on the issue today, and also if you have questions, you can ask them to us by Twitter using @BristolDA. You can also ask questions right in the online forum. Sticking with the school environment and the issues of teens who use drugs or drive after using drugs, what can the education community, what can schools do other than using SAD chapters to perhaps make a difference in this issue and educate youth?
Can I, excuse me, can I answer to that?
Absolutely.
The city that I live in, Taunton, they've started assemblies in the school department. Then my husband, my son, and I have gone to the schools and spoken to the middle school children about the effects of drugs. We have a PSA, a public service announcement, that we made with my son. It features my son in his journey, and the students see this, and then my son speaks to them for a little bit. He has some speech issues, but he can speak enough to talk to the kids, and it's really been a tremendous positive turnout from the students. They've really connected well with my son. He's 26 years old, but he talks to them about, when I was in middle school, about, I played baseball and I played basketball and I played Taunton East Little League and I played Taunton High football and varsity baseball, and the kids just seem to connect to him and to listen to him. And since that's happened, he's received hundreds of letters from students thanking him for speaking. He's even received some letters from kids telling them that if drugs ever came into their lives where they had the opportunity to use them, that they would think about him and remember him, that, drugs affected him in that he now lives with brain damage, and that, unfortunately, bad things can happen, and bad things can happen to good people. So I think that it's working really well in Taunton in the school department. They're really being proactive about it and having us go out and speak to the kids. And we're going to be doing the high school later this year.
Thank you so much for being here. We have Lori Gonzalez with us, who is a parent advocate, and as you're hearing, her son made the decision to use drugs and get behind the wheel and is still dealing with the consequences, and lifelong consequences.
Lifelong. He is now permanently disabled. He's legally blind. He does have some sight, but he has what's called cortical blindness from the brain damage. His eyes do not connect with his brain, so there's absolutely nothing wrong with his eyes. He has speech issues. He has fine motor skill issues, things like buttoning his pants, zipping his pants, eating, brushing his teeth are now a difficult task for him. And he also has a problem walking. He can walk. He has an orthotic brace on his right leg, which helps him walk. But his life, as he knew it, as a young 25-year-old athletic man, is now gone. It's completely different. Now for the rest of his life, he has to depend on my husband and I, and he will live with us for the rest of his life because he made a poor choice. So I think it's good to educate people out there that this can happen. You know, a lot of people think, well, it's not going to happen to me. It won't happen to me. It just happens to other people. Well, believe me when I tell you that it can happen to you. It really can.
Thank you for sharing. A very difficult story to share, but I think it is stories like yours that make the difference and save the lives of others, and you're seeing this through the wonderful work you're doing, so thank you for sharing. Do you have information that you can share with our viewers as far as maybe getting their hands on your PSA or having perhaps your son and you present for their schools or their institutions?
Yeah, they can actually just give me a call directly. You can call me. My cell is 508-863-6075, or you can email me at Lori, Lori, at fbinsure.com, and I can send you a copy of the PSA if you wanted to view it. We're more than happy to be able to go out and speak to any organization or any school that's willing to have us. You know, we always feel like we want to try to make something positive out of a negative that happened, and if we can just help one family not go through what we've been through, then it's all worth it.
Excellent. And what I can do as well is I can share Lori's information via the Bristol County District Attorney's Office social media sites, as well as our website, which is www.bristolda.com, and all of our social media links are on there. So we will post Lori's information for anyone who is interested. So we've talked about what schools can do. We've talked about what friends can do. We've talked about what parents can do. And earlier we were mentioning drug courts and them growing in popularity. So what can drug courts do to help with this issue?
Well, I think first of all, and you know, Ashley, that the Bristol DA's office is very involved, very supportive of our local drug courts. I was just talking to Laurie earlier about trying to encourage the establishment of a drug court in the northern part of our county, in Taunton and Attleboro. And I think what that does is send a message that, you know, as a community partner, we want to help with this problem. We don't just want to prosecute, and we don't just want to send people to jail and harm them further. What we want to do is be a partner, and that's what I think drug courts do, is that they recognize that the fact that people become addicted is not necessarily they're not criminals because that happens to them, and that there may be better ways of dealing with that problem. Drug courts are absolutely fascinating. I've become more and more enamored by the statistics of drug courts throughout the country and locally. And I think that they can assist people who are struggling with abuse to get through their problem, because I think that, I'm no expert, but I'm assuming that people with substance abuse problems benefit from a whole community trying to help them with it. And that's what drug courts do. There's treatment providers, the judge, the probation, attorneys, prosecutors, a lot of people involved.
So for those who aren't entirely familiar with how the criminal justice process works, the legal process, if somebody was to go through drug court, is it a collaborative effort? Do you make recommendations? Is there a term of treatment that somebody has to go through? Is it individualized?
There are many there are about 2,500 drug courts throughout the country. We have locally, we have one in New Bedford, we have one that is starting up in Fall River, and we have three in our juvenile courts. They're a little bit different than our adult drug courts. The difference between the regular judicial system, where someone is placed on probation or even sent to jail as a sanction, the whole point of the drug courts is that they come in, everybody involved recognizes that this person has this problem, and the whole point of the drug court is to assist them with that problem. Sometimes that means that when they fail, there's an intermediate sanction, but then there are also rewards when they have been successful. It involves, they generally run in stages. Drug courts can be different. Locally, our New Bedford drug court, for example, is, I believe, a 2-year, generally a no less than 18-month more often a 2-year program. It's in stages. The first phase is that someone is required to come to court, come to the drug court session once a week. When you graduate from that session, then you have to come to court fewer on, I believe it's once a month. And then when you graduate into phase 3, it's even shorter than that. The point of the initial phase is that coming to court, making sure you're clean, you stay on top of this problem, which is still very recent. In the later phases, some of the best drug courts certainly now are assisting people in the recovery aspects. So our office, the Bristol County DA's office, just got a grant for the New Bedford Drug Court, which will provide in part for training, education with our local community college, so that participants will be eligible for financial aid through our office, through the grant, to get education, to learn various skills that they would otherwise not have. Community service projects. The whole point being, now that you've recovered, you are now going back into the community with some new skills. So.
Excellent. Well, that is excellent information to know, because I'm sure that many friends and parents are hesitant to contact an official or contact the police out of the fear that they are going to be destroying their teen's life, that criminal charges are going to be brought. But the message here today is that there are programs to assist and help these teens who are using drugs. So please don't ever hesitate to call the district attorney's office or call your local police department, because we will work to have the best possible outcome for your teen. Well, we've talked about a lot of stuff today. I guess if we can just go around and kind of wrap up, and perhaps everybody offer just a few thoughts from your personal opinion, your standpoint on how we can encourage teens to stay away from drugs, and what we can encourage others to do to reduce this issue.
Who wants to start?
Well, from my standpoint, my situation was a little bit different, being the parent of someone who decided to use drugs, in that there was a stigma that went with drug abuse, and I fell into that whole embarrassment. I kind of isolated myself in the house. I felt like, people out there don't really understand addiction, and they have this perception of what an addict is. And my advice, especially to parents, is to try to not feel that, because actually me speaking publicly about this and speaking to my friends has been really a liberating thing for me. And it's given me the opportunity to try to help others. But I just want to tell families and even friends out there that yes, there is a stigma, but the only way we're going to get past that stigma is for people to be more educated about what an addict is. That an addict is just the kid next door. They're not this idea of what people think an addict is, and for just to people to go out there and get the help that they need for their loved one, for their child, whoever it may be, and just don't be embarrassed or ashamed.
Thank you.
Laurie and I were talking about this before, and I think that it has become such a pervasive problem. It affects everyone today, all walks of society, and the whole point is that I think that we are looking at it from a perspective that we need to solve this problem. We need to offer assistance throughout the community. I think that's what we certainly are trying to do, and make some changes.
I think one of the biggest things we've touched on a few times is just knowledge of the whole issue. People juveniles have the Superman that can never happen to me. It's not me. It's not us. We'll all be fine. But just knowledge of what is out there and what could happen and what is happening is a huge step. And we have to just get that information and spread it. All these links are great. Facebook, Twitter, the DA's office. It's great to have all that info available and out there, so people, they see stuff like this and they can go onto the webpage now, and they don't have to. Maybe if they are embarrassed to ask a parent, they can now just go on the website and look it up. Oh wow, that could happen, or that is happening to me, and now they know things that they can do if they are embarrassed about it, or too shy, or don't have anyone. So
I think coming from students who don't, for students who don't use drugs, and it's to stand by your decision to not do drugs. If you choose not to do it, then don't. And set an example for others who might be influenced by this, and be that positive role model to your fellow peers. And also, for parents and for teens too, is to have that conversation, to communicate this issue and talk to them about that. And then, like you mentioned, use resources online. If someone is frightened to talk to a parent or talk to someone, you can use those resources online, but also have that conversation with your friends if you know that they need help.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So in closing, I mean, a lot of really great remarks have already been made, and so I guess my thoughts are just going to tie it all together. But there's a lot of educational materials, there are conversations that are being started, but the thing that I think we need to remember to do most is don't be afraid to initiate those hard conversations with your peers, with your parents, with teachers, with law enforcement, just across the board, and we need to keep this conversation going. Again, there are resources on our website, www.sad.org. Go check them out, see what you can find. We have a lot of great partners, both in government and different community groups, and so I guess I just encourage you from a SAD National standpoint to go and look at the resources and see what we have to offer. Keep the conversation going.
Well, thank you so much for joining us and for tuning in. It is National Drug Facts Week, and today we are kicking it off by talking about teen drug driving, and that is the message, to talk about the issues. We will be issuing a follow-up blog post in regards to this forum that we've had today to provide you with information, links, resources, PSAs, and everything that you could possibly need. So please visit www.bristolda.com for all of the follow-up information pertinent to reducing and hopefully ending teen drug driving.
Thanks, Ashley, and thank you to all of our panelists for coming out today. We hope you all who tuned in were able to get a lot of good information and resources. We also want to share a few other resources with you that are available through the National Institute on Drug Abuse, and these resources are free. Everybody loves free. So one is Marijuana Facts Parents Need to Know, Marijuana Facts for Teens, and then, of course, their lovely Drugs Shatter the Myths is a great resource for you to bring into your schools, public libraries, wherever. Again, these resources are free. And then if you're thinking about doing a forum similar to this, the Office of National Drug Control Policy has a really cool online resource kit. It's called Teen Drug Driving, a Community Awareness Activity Toolkit. And it has a lot of information on how to put together a forum similar to this if you want to do one in your school or community.
And as you've already heard, this week is National Drug Facts Week. We encourage you to check out the website, drugfactsweek.drugabuse.gov. There's a host of activities on there. Make sure you check out the National Drug IQ Challenge that's happening. Get your school involved, and as you've heard today, keep the conversation going. From all of us at the Bristol County DA's office, SAD, and the National Institute on Drug Abuse, thank you so much for joining us. Remember to drive safely. Have a great afternoon.